Hello everybody, let's try again, shall we? I do apologise for the slight problems there with the stream. Obviously, I'm doing this all on my own at the moment and half of the team are currently away on vacation. So we're a little, short on staff, and sometimes, especially with this rural internet connection that we have, sometimes things go a little bit awry. But we are back up now. So hopefully we can get everything working as it should. Now, today we're going to give you a live stream where we're going to be discussing a very important update in the ongoing battery fires involving certain model year Chevrolet Bolt EVs. Now, as those who watched the channel earlier this week will know, there was an issue involving a 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EV that belonged to a Vermont elected official, which caught fire on July 1st. He plugged it in overnight on June 30th with approximately 10% state of charge, and then he was awoken in the morning with his car making strange noises. And shortly after that, his car's alarm went off and the car burst into flames as the firefighters had arrived on scene and were preparing to investigate the smoke that was billowing out from underneath his Bolt EV. The car was successfully extinguished. I don't believe any damage was sustained to the house. The elected official acted very quickly and unplugged his Bolt, so it wasn't connected when the fire actually took place. But what was particularly concerning about this, as we covered earlier on this week, was the fact that the Bolt EV had received the permanent software update that Chevrolet General Motors had said would fix any issues relating to fires involving 2017 through select 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EVs. Now, this is particularly concerning as just like the Hyundai Kona Electric, the Chevrolet Bolt EV sustained significant attention last year because a handful of cars caught fire after they'd been charged or while they were charging. The problem seems to stem from an issue with either the battery pack or the battery management system. And at the time, we and many other channels and many other news outlets commented that there was a similarity between the Hyundai Kona EV fires and also the Chevrolet Bolt EV fires. Now, Hyundai initially decided that it was going to roll out a software update which actually restricted the car's maximum state of charge and, according to some owners, made a few other tweaks to the battery pack that was supposed to prevent the Hyundai Kona EV from suffering a thermal runaway situation in which the battery caught fire. Unfortunately, after that update had been applied, the cars continued to have issues, and there were a couple of cases of Kona EVs that had that initial software update catching fire, and so Hyundai did what it really only had the option left to do, which was to announce a global recall campaign of all affected Kona EV battery packs. Now, not all Kona EVs were affected, just certain model years made between a certain amount of time. At the same time, we saw the Chevrolet Bolt have some issues too. It had some battery fires, and those battery fires also seemed to have an eerily similar kind of exposure and kind of timeline to them. In the case of Chevrolet, it rolled out a temporary software patch, maybe we should call it a patch, in which it restricted the car's maximum state of charge to a lower level than it would ordinarily do. It removed Hilltop Reserve Mode, which was something that the 2017 to 2018 Bolt EVs had, and basically put those cars into a permanent restricted maximum charge mode. Then after that, Chevrolet said it had come up with a fix, and it rolled out that fix, and it rolled out the fix to 2019 Bolt EVs first. And then it rolled out a fix a month or so later, would prevent any issues from occurring. To be clear, maybe that's, I'm paraphrasing, but the implication was that GM believed it had solved the problem and it had programmed new battery management subroutines, monitoring subroutines within the pack, within the battery management system, that would make it possible for Bolt EVs to notice before anything nasty happened that things were going wrong. Now, that new software update, the process of updating the cars, involved putting the battery pack through a short test routine to see if there were any noticeable issues with the pack before the upgrade took place, and testing individual modules. If any modules failed at that point, GM said it would replace affected modules as it saw fit. For cars that passed that initial test, it would reprogram the battery management unit with this new, more advanced software and then send owners on their way. As part of that reprogram, it included new subroutines, which we know very little about at this point. Those subroutines were designed to try and identify problems before they occurred. Apparently, GM has done some research into identifying those problems before they come into existence. And what happened at that point was that GM then said if the car detects a problem with the battery pack after the software update has been applied, it will put the car into a mode where it won't drive. It will also, if the car is parked up, sound the horn and flash the lights to warn you that something is wrong. Now, at the time, I remember thinking that was a bit weird, because obviously if your car starts making loud noises and flashing its horn and blaring its lights or flashing its lights, that's what most people would perceive as a car alarm misbehaving, right? We've all been in a parking lot where we've seen the horn go, the lights flashing and the horns going off. But GM did that as a way of warning that there was something wrong with the car. It also kept an eye on the car through the telematics system. Now, unfortunately, the car which caught fire on July 1st had that software update. It was a 2019 Bolt EV, and I believe the other Bolt EV that has caught fire since the software update was applied was also a 2019 Bolt EV. And in the video that we made at the start of this week, where we discussed this, I said I was worried about 2019 Bolt EVs specifically, but also had some caution about 2017 and 2018 Bolts. GM had issued a kind of a blanket statement that didn't really go into any depth. That's hardly surprising. Often companies like this have, issues being able to state things as clearly as perhaps we'd like them to, because their legal teams want to protect the company. Before I go any further, I just want to thank Helianthropy for your kind donation, and also Patrick. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just kind of going through my list here, and I know that there's going to be some questions. I'm going to get to those questions at the end, and Erin is helping me out in the chat, as is Winter. So hopefully between the three of us, we'll be able to figure out exactly where everything is going. All right, so where had I got to? Okay, this battery fire occurred involving a 2019 Bolt EV that had that final update applied. So clearly something caused that car to catch fire, and the software didn't notice it quickly enough. From the accounts that I have heard, and I should point out here, they are secondhand accounts. I haven't spoken to the owner directly. He reportedly said that he heard this sucking sound coming out of his battery pack. That's what woke him up. And then when he went outside and noticed smoke coming out from underneath the rear of his car, he unplugged the car and called 911. When the fire department was already there, about 10 minutes later, they were preparing to make the car safe. That's when the car ignited. And if you look at the accident photographs from the Vermont Fire Department, you'll notice that this car has remained in a far more intact state than most of the vehicles that have been destroyed. So far, there's been about a dozen Chevrolet Bolt EVs out of, I think, nearly 70,000 made that have caught fire. And statistically, obviously, that's a very small number. But as is the case with any fire involving a vehicle that has caught fire due to a manufacturing defect, we do need to get to the bottom of that ASAP. So, this stream is now to tell you about an update that we received earlier today from Chevrolet on its website, saying this is the situation as it stands right now, and this is what we want you to do as Bolt EV owners. And it's pretty severe. July 14th, 2021, important update from General Motors. I'm going to read it out to you here. General Motors has been notified of 2 recent Chevrolet Bolt EV fire incidents in vehicles that were remedied as part of the safety recall announced in November 2020. Out of an abundance of caution, we are asking owners of 2017 to 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EVs who were part of the recall population to park their vehicles outdoors immediately after charging and not leave their vehicles charging overnight while we investigate these incidents. Customers who have not had the remedy completed should still visit their dealer for the recall remedy while our investigation continues. And then it talks about GM's commitment to safety. And this is an additional statement on top of the previous one, which says General Motors is notifying owners of select 2017 to 2019 model year Chevrolet Bolt EVs that it's developed a remedy to complete the previously announced safety recall. And obviously, in the case of this car, well, it doesn't appear to have worked. And so let's go through what we know of the incident and where I sit with this and what my thoughts are and what's next for General Motors. First up, let's talk about some of the questions that people have had and sent our way in the last couple of weeks. First of all, are all Chevrolet Bolt EVs affected? No. This appears to only be vehicles that were fitted with battery cells produced in South Korea by LG Energy for Chevrolet for the 2017, 2018, and part of the 2019 model year Bolt EVs. Some 2019 Bolt EVs are not affected. They had battery packs containing cells that were made in, I think it was in Michigan, at a facility owned jointly by LG Energy and General Motors. Those vehicles are not affected, not believed to be affected by this recall. Only cells made in Korea are believed to be part of the problem here. And what's important to note here is that those cells obviously were some of the first cells to be made for the Bolt EV, and in a very similar vein, the Hyundai Kona EV fires, the affected cells for those vehicles came from an LG Energy facility in China. So it appears that there are 2 facilities that are under investigation here for potential defects. Hyundai has already confirmed that there was, in fact, a manufacturing defect in the cell, in the way that the cell was layered. If you don't know, battery cells are made by layering different components on top of one another, and it could have been in what it was in the case of the Hyundai Kona, that there was a misalignment of one of the pieces of equipment in the manufacturing process that was not identified, that led to a manufacturing defect, which in turn increased the likelihood of a potential fire for those batteries. We don't know if that is ultimately going to be the cause of the fires for the Chevrolet Bolt EV, but frankly, I am starting to lean towards a mechanical defect rather than, some poor planning. I am not a battery specialist, I'm not an engineer, but that is where my money would be if I were a betting person. I'm not a betting person. All right, to the next thing. If you have a 2020 or 2021 Bolt EV, or you're thinking about buying one of the 2022 Bolt EVs, as far as we are aware, there are no problems with those cars' batteries. Those batteries are made using cells in the US at a US facility, and as far as we are aware, they are all good, and there's been no documented issues there. What I said on Monday, and what I should reiterate here is that LG Energy's had a pretty bad year when it comes to battery cells. It's had some issues with the Bolt EV batteries. It's had some issues with the Hyundai Kona EV batteries. Ford has had some issues with its battery cells for the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which are LG Energy supplied. And also, I believe Porsche has had some issues with some of the battery packs in its cars. And so they're all from the same company. I'm not going to point fingers here, but it does seem... Occam's razor seems to be suggesting that there is a manufacturing defect somewhere along the line there. Let's just leave it at that. So let's go back to the noises that the senator heard coming from their car. I'm going to try and find the quote because I want to make sure that I actually say things correctly here. I want to make sure I've got his name right. So 1 second, bear with me. Vermont State Representative Timothy Briglin, he had said that he heard this sucking sound coming from underneath his car. That could have been a pressure change within the batteries, a venting within the batteries. I can tell you from personal experience, when one of my own DIY cars caught fire or smoked the batteries, what happened was we had a thermal runaway incident in a nickel metal hydride pack within one of my cars, and it made that similar sound. In fact, I likened it to popcorn popping, and when I went outside, that was the noise. It was like popcorn, like having a bag of popcorn in the microwave, and that's what it sounded like to me. But it could have been that venting. All right. The other thing that I wanted to note here is that from the fires, from the fire photographs from Vermont State Police, it does look as if the car in question had the seat of the fire came from the same part of the battery as the other fires. So if you look at this here, you'll see that this is indeed a rear seat fire, and it does appear to have started either in this rear seat area or underneath in that similar kind of area. Now, it's important here is because the way that the battery pack is made in the Bolt EV, as is common with a lot of electric cars, is that the cells here, I believe, are doubled up a little bit more than they would be in other parts of the battery pack. That could indicate that there was, there's extra thermal issues there, and that's something maybe that GM has to work on. But again, I'm not going to speculate too much about that. The other thing that's important to note here is that the batteries in both cases, both 2019 Bolt EV fires that have occurred this year, appear to have taken place in cars with a low state of charge when they were plugged in, charged all the way up or near full. And it does make me wonder if those vehicles were properly balanced, if they had a proper cell balancing. Interestingly, Rashlim says the rear seat is where the high voltage connect is. And that could also be an issue, but I think it's probably at the cell level. And I think we are at a point now where General Motors and LG Energy has one option now, and that option is to replace the battery packs in all affected vehicles. I don't see how anybody could actually legitimately want to just drive their car at this point, knowing that there is a potential problem. Now, I'm going to answer some of the questions that we have on in the stream. So please bear with me as I go back in the stream. I'm going to answer another question here, and it's one from our team, Erin, who owns a Chevrolet Volt with a V, and several other people have actually asked me as well, why is this not a problem with the Chevrolet Volts from 2017 through 2019? Why is it only the Bolts with a B? And the difference is here, the battery pack in the Chevrolet Volt with a V is a different battery pack. It's a slightly different cell chemistry. It has been made in a slightly different way. And it's also not as energy dense, and I believe it's not put through necessarily quite as much strain as it would be in the Bolt. I might be wrong there. Someone who is an engineer, please correct me if I'm wrong. But as I understand it, although they are also LG Energy supplied packs, I believe, they are slightly different cell designs. They're set up in a different way. New platforms up to a common design across many, many different vehicles, because that brings in economies of scale. And of course, that does also mean that if there's a problem with one of the vehicles in the future of those battery pack designs, then it's going to be one that will probably end up affecting all the vehicles. All right, so Philip says, I have two 2019 Bolt EVs. Now, Philip and other people with 2019 Bolt EVs, what you can do here, if you're worried about it, is go to the Chevrolet Bolt EV recall website, and what you can do there is you can actually enter in your VIN number. There's a link to a checker. You can enter in your VIN number. I'm going to put the link here in the chat, and that will tell you if your car is involved or not. Some of your cars, if you some of you with 2019 Bolt EVs won't be affected. Some of you with 2017, 2018, and 2019 Bolts will be. As far as I understand, all 2017 and 18 Bolts are affected, and about half of the 2019 Bolt EVs. Someone else said, Stefan said, the Opel Ampera E, which Bolt is that? It is obviously a Bolt as well, because it was made by General Motors in Detroit, and it was shipped out to Europe when General Motors was still obviously owner of Opel and Vauxhall. It was sold only in Europe as the Opel Ampera E. A limited number of vehicles were sold, and even after Opel was sold and Vauxhall was sold to PSA, which is now obviously part of the Stellantis group, there was still a number of Ampera E's that were exported, that were made under previous commitments to produce and sell those. As far as I am aware, those vehicles have the same battery pack. I don't know what the recall situation is for that cars, and it seems that also those cell manufacturers, LG Energy, is ultimately going to have to deal with that. Now, I think at this point we're going to have to see a buyback. Now, I spoke to Winter at the top of the hour, and Winter told me that he, quote, was really having second thoughts about having rejected the buyback offer that he got from General Motors for his Bolt EV. And for those who don't know, Winter had investigated the possibility of getting a Bolt EV buyback, and he decided against it because the amount of money that he was offered wasn't as much as he thought it should have been, and the value of the car was really... Bolts, interestingly, like a lot of EVs right now, are going up in value because automakers are struggling to get all of the components they need to build new cars. That means a lot of used cars are going up in value, and so the buyback offer he got was pretty low. So he decided instead to come to the Pacific Northwest with both his Model 3 and his Chevrolet Bolt. My wife, Kate, who is actually in the chat room, I did see her pop by a few seconds ago. She and I drove a Winter's Chevrolet Bolt EV last week from Boston all the way back to Portland, Oregon. And while we were driving, we did suffer an error that popped up on the dashboard. I think there were two errors. I can't remember the exact the exact error codes, but let me just look those up for a second. P1E00 and P0AA1 with the orange warning triangle, they were contactor errors that I think seemed to come in as we were going through Colorado, through the Rockies, coming down and regenerative braking. It popped one of those warning lights up, and the warning light stayed all the way through until we crossed into Oregon from Idaho, and then mysteriously the warning reset itself, and I'm assuming that Winter's going to go and have the car looked at that point. Now to my advice. Obviously, General Motors has said, don't charge your car overnight, which is frankly massive. I have never heard of a car company saying do not charge your car overnight, but the implications here is that there is definitely concern from General Motors that an unattended Bolt EV, if left plugged in, could suddenly enter into a thermal runaway situation. There's also suggestion that you don't park your cars indoors. You can charge them indoors. The wording of the statement's kind of weird. It says, move your cars outside as soon as you finish charging them. But it also suggests that you might not be able to use your Bolt EV in a normal, functional way from this point onwards. Now, those who watch the channel regularly will know that I love my Chevrolet Bolt EV. Artemis is a great little car. It is my daily driver. We liked our Bolt EV so much that my wife bought a second one used to replace her Nissan Leaf. And we use it. We use those cars every day, practically. We live out in the country, up in the Tualatin Mountains. There's no public transport up here, and they are our way of getting around. Now, at the moment, we have used Hilltop Reserve Mode. We've always used Hilltop Reserve Mode because we live on a hill, and I think that everybody who has a Bolt EV made between 2017 and 2019 who knows that you were part of that original recall needs to be making use of Hilltop Reserve Mode. And I would perhaps even suggest not even going as far as Hilltop Reserve Mode, but maybe stopping at 70% state of charge and doing that 20 to 70% charge rather than taking it down into the red zone. I would also, as I said on Monday, avoid going into that lower 20% state of charge. That also seems to be connected in some way to the issues that we've been seeing. And I would hate to hear of anybody else who is having an issue. Now, at this point, we know there's a class action lawsuit going on against Chevrolet. And frankly, I don't blame consumers for wanting to be part of that, because at this point, those of us who do have Bolt EVs have cars that cannot be used as they were. Statistically, they shouldn't. I mean, it's just a very small percentage. But also, we should be looking at this in the idea of if we can't charge the cars up to 80% full, or can't charge them up to 100% full, and you can't use that bottom 20%, you've actually got a car with a massively reduced range. And that could change a lot of things. Now, who's to blame here? I know a lot of people will be saying that General Motors is to blame, but it's not. General Motors obviously did engineer the Bolt, but it worked very extensively with LG Energy from the get-go. And I remember at the Bolt launch, one of the things that was really hammered home was that LG Energy had taken on a lot of the engineering, both LG Energy and LG Components, or LG, the larger company. So LG designed the drivetrain, the motor, the battery packs, the infotainment system, a lot of the in-car electronics. They were all designed by LG or LG associated companies like LG Energy. And then General Motors did the building of the car, the actual putting the nuts and bolts together to make the car. Than a year, or just over a year, from concept car to production ready vehicle, took just about a year, which in the automotive world is pretty unheard of. A couple of companies have done it, very few. Some people are saying GM is to blame for the final product, period. you're right in so much as the final testing does sit with GM. But if the components supplied to GM by LG Energy were defective, then LG Energy also has a big part to play. And with LG Energy having issues with multiple automakers, it really doesn't look good for the brand. I also think that there are some issues here with the way that the whole kind of court battle between LG Energy and SK Innovation that played out earlier this year is kind of interesting, because SK Innovation has not appeared to have any problems with its batteries, but obviously LG Energy did not want SK Innovation to sell and produce batteries in the US because of alleged patent infringement. Now, these two companies have been fighting it out for years, accusing each other of copyright and all kinds of other things. And it just feels like this last piece of news from LG does prove that we need another battery supplier. LG Energy has been notorious over the years for some pretty unsavory practices. Battery price hikes suddenly happening and other things happening. I don't know if that patently happened or not, but if you hear this on top of there are some buffering issues going on, and I'm afraid I can't do a whole lot about that because we're out in the country. If you want to help us to have a better, stronger internet connection, unfortunately Starlink is not that connection. If you want to help us get a better connection, then help us get a studio, help us grow the channel. We do want to go back to a full studio location in the greater Portland area, and hopefully that means we'll get a really solid internet connection. And it also means when we do a live stream like this, I'll be able to make use of the other talents of the rest of the team. All right, I'm going to answer some questions. Is LG producing batteries for the ID4? No. In North America, certainly, the ID4... in North America, certainly, the ID4's battery packs are being produced by SK Innovation. Or certainly long-term, SK Innovation is also going to be producing batteries for the Ford F-150 Lightning. And I think it's quite telling that Ford has switched from LG Energy to SK Innovation for that purpose. Have the fires only been once the battery was charged and still plugged in, maybe during a cell balancing process, says Stephanie? I don't know, Stephanie. The original fires, there were a couple that occurred without the battery plugged in and a couple that had, and it appears that we are instances where the battery has caught fire after being charged up. And then Skylar says... LG had to pay 70% of the Kona replacements. Hopefully the same will happen with the Bolt EV. And this is something that I'm absolutely positively hopeful will happen, because LG Energy made the battery pack. As some of you said, GM should be to blame for the way it's handled it. And I think GM has handled this terribly. But at the end of the day, the engineering, the battery packs, that problem lies with LG Energy. And I think that is the one that's going to end up paying through the nose. And I'm wondering if LG Energy is going to survive another big recall similar to the Hyundai Kona EV. I know GM has the money right now to be able to just write off the replacement battery packs. So I hope it does that. It is producing battery packs in the US now, so I'm hoping that it will just put those in. And as far as I'm aware, the battery packs in the 2020s and the 2021s are physically the same size as the ones in the 17s, 18s, and 19s. Paul says, I've tried multiple times to tell you guys the story of my buyer program with GM that I went through, but no one on Facebook or Twitter wants to hear my story. That's not actually true, Paul. What's going on here is that we get a lot of requests every day from people all over the world, and we hear a lot of people reach out and contact us. We've had lots of people reach out to us about this, and so if we haven't got back to you yet, I'm sorry. We'll do our best, but we can't answer everybody who reaches out to us independently. We try and read as many of those emails and contacts as we possibly can. Sometimes we don't get to, and last week, obviously, everybody was away. So if you've sent anything to us in the last couple of weeks, the chances are we're clearing through that backlog right now. All right. Can they trace back these car batteries to when exactly they were built? Narrow it down. Sandeep, yeah, I believe they can. As far as I'm aware, all of the Bolt EV batteries, like most EV batteries today, they have a QR code on the battery box, on the battery cells. They should be able to trace those battery cells back. Whether it will be an issue with the actual machine that made them important right now, because the biggest the same point, anybody with a 2017 through 2019 Bolt EV should be following the advice of GM right now, should be acting very cautiously to make sure that they don't have that happen again. All right. Is it possible, says Not Totally Sane, to tell if my battery pack is from Korea or the United States? And the answer, Not Totally Sane, is reach out to General Motors. They will have your car's VIN number in a database, and they will know which battery your car has, whether it was made in the US or whether it was made in South Korea. If you have a 2019, you've got a kind of a 50-50 chance it might be made in South Korea. It might have been made in the US. But if you have a 2017 and 2018 Bolt EV, then yeah, your battery pack will likely have come, almost certainly, from South Korea. After my recall, said Stephanie, my technician indicated a 0.02 volt variance. Maybe they talked about 0.08 volt variance. GM was looking... Maybe they talked about 0.08 volt variance GM was looking for isn't sensitive enough. Right, okay. So Stephanie said that their car had a 0.02 variance. The largest difference between the strongest and the weakest cells was 0.02 volts. And if it was larger than 0.08 volts, then there might have been potentially a problem. And again, this just seems to potentially be an issue with the balancing of the pack, and I would kind of loop back to what I said earlier, which is if the packs are not being balanced properly and they're being pushed. But to my knowledge, Carter, both of the fires occurred without Hilltop Reserve mode engaged. But to be clear, 2019 Bolt EVs do not have the same Hilltop Reserve mode that the 2017s and 2018s have. So it is slightly different. So just be aware of that. Magic Unicorn says the issue is GM outsourced everything, so there's likely 2 layers of abstraction, and that's part of the challenge when building an EV, when doing these kind of outsourcing of components. If there is a problem, then it means that automakers are going to take twice as long to be able to get to the bottom. And it's one of the reasons why most automakers are now talking about vertical integration, producing everything in-house, and making sure that everything kind of is under one roof, because that makes things a whole lot easier. But as Mark said, run the VIN. If your car is in the recall, it has Korean cells. News story from 5 days ago says GM has verified 8 battery-related Bolt EV fires. Greg, I believe it's slightly higher than that. I've been keeping a rough tally, and I believe that some of the reporting appears to quote a lower number than actually was. All right. Squeeze senpai noticed me. So, you know, it is unfortunate. What am I going to be doing at this point? Well, honestly, I don't know. My Chevrolet Bolt EV is sitting outside on my driveway next to my wife's Chevrolet Bolt EV, which is sitting outside on our driveway, which is next to Winter's Chevrolet Bolt EV, which is also sitting on my driveway. And right now, I think what I'm going to do after we have finished this video is we're going to park all 3 cars in a different position. We're probably going to move all 3 cars away from the outside of my outside of my garage, and I will put them on the driveway. Luckily, we have a big driveway here, so I'll probably park all 3 cars side by side on the driveway to ensure that nothing bad happens. Interestingly, Winter's car has not fully charged after its little road trip because we were charging it slowly on the granny cable, partly because we wanted to make sure that the battery had a chance to even those cells out. So Germany apparently says 6 Opel fires in Germany not had a look involved. And when I say Bolt EVs, I mean Bolt EVs and Opel Ampera E's. In our price range right now that we could easily kind of just get behind and get in the wheel of. Unless GM was to go, okay, we will kind of swap you up. We'll put you in a new 2022 Bolt. If GM was to do that with all of the cars it's currently got, it's going to cost the company a lot of money. But actually, that might be a better solution than making people wait and give people subpar experience while they try and get to the bottom of these fires. So, as those of you who watch the channel regularly will know, I'm on the waiting list for a Ford F-150 electric. We want to use it both for stuff at the house and kind of this little small holding we've got here. We want to be able to go and get stuff for the chickens, potentially woodworking supplies and gardening stuff, soil and all of that. Hauling stuff for the garden. Also, as a chase car for when we're filming stuff for this channel, so we can strap one of the camera guys into the pickup bed and that gives us a better filming base. But also when... And honestly, I'm hopeful that we can get behind the wheel of a Ford Mustang a Ford F-150 Lightning pretty soon, because that would certainly solve our issues. But that pickup truck is not due to launch until this time next year. So I don't really want to be without a car for a year, but at the same point, I don't know if I want to be driving my Bolt EV if this is going to be a problem that continues. And I know someone's going to say, well, what about Tesla? We'd all hoped for. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to ask the team who are talking to me in a different chat if there's anything that I've missed urgently in the chat. Please, I'm going to recommend that everybody looks into their lemon law where they live. I think that would be a smart move. And if you're joining the stream a little bit later, let's just go back to this announcement. General Motors has been notified of 2 recent Chevrolet Bolt EV fire incidents in vehicles that were remedies as part of the safety recall announced in November 2020. Out of an abundance of caution, we are asking owners of 2017 through 2019 Bolt EVs who were part of the recall population to park their vehicles outdoors immediately after charging and not leave their vehicles charging overnight while we investigate these incidents. Interestingly, General Motors is still asking people to go and have the recall done, which seems a little strange, but I mean, I guess that makes more sense than just leaving them, because I'm guessing that they're hopeful that happening. But do I think that I'm going to be driving the car? Well, yeah, I am, because it's my only car. Jasper says do I think GM has changed its tune because one of the fires is a lawmaker's car? I don't believe so. I believe that the battery fire happening post-recall is enough to cause enough worry amongst the general Bolt-owning population. I don't want to speak for Winter. And someone says an interesting question. I don't know what Binter's going to do. Maybe he can let me know what he's now going to do. Maybe his answer is like mine. I don't know at this point. We are going to investigate our options, though. I will tell you that. Erin said there's an interesting question from the chat. Who is liable if one of the bolts starts a wildfire? Oh my goodness. I would think probably whoever made the car and the battery packs. That would be LG Energy and Chevrolet. What about bolts that were exported to Ukraine? Well, if you exported a bolt, a fact will R to R have on the aftermarket bolts, whilst the Warrant EV is close to 100,000 miles. So that is a worry. If that Bolt EV is gonna exit its warranty, then we are gonna have problems. If you want to watch the other video that we did, there is also another. I'm sure we'll be making some more updates on this as and when it happens. I just wanted to let you all know that we are investigating this, and we are serious about this, just as everybody else is. I think our challenge here is making sure that people feel safe, and I personally don't feel 100% safe driving the car right now, but I don't have any other choice, and I suspect I'm not the only person in that situation. So keep your battery last week pretty much on the road. Although we did, to be honest, we didn't go below 20% all that often, and we didn't go above 80% full all that often, because that is the quickest way to drive a Bolt EV or any other rapid charging EV on a long distance trip. But just play it safe, be aware. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by following one of the links below. That includes Ko-fi, it includes Bitcoin, and of course it also includes Patreon. We're going to be working on a really awesome thing for our Patreon supporters soon. If you are one of the top tier $100 a month Patreon supporters, you're going to get a video made just for you, which we will share with everybody on the channel, but it will be a video that you get to nominate a topic for. So that's a really exciting thing. If you've ever wanted us to make a video on a topic that you really wanted us to do, that's one way of getting us to do it. Become $100 a month Patreon supporters. Don't forget too that we also have the swag store, so do check that out as well over at Redbubble, and as someone said in the chat, and Ian, most definitely, and Ian. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and as always, keep evolving.